I'm now joined by Anna LaCastro and Owen Camaros. The men's team recently suffered a loss to Wisconsin in a 2-0 game. Anna, what do you think caused the outcome in this game?
Well, from the perspective of standing on the field for that whole game, which by the way was very cold and windy, I could see firsthand that Wisconsin's ball movement was just better and faster, hands down. And that's the kind of thing you want to see when you're watching good soccer. Not just lobs into the offensive zone, but a team that can actually pass quickly and effectively and move up the field as a unit. And that is what Wisconsin had over Penn State in that game. Penn State was not able to build an attack out of the back without losing the ball in their own attacking third. The closest thing they had to real effective forward movement was having Malik Dowda dribble straight through the middle of the field. And he had some good through balls off of that, but they were going to forwards who ended up losing the ball immediately because they were put in a 4v1 situation right away, which never works out.
Yeah, I agree completely with your point. Dowda was the lone bright spot in a very tough game. I think for Penn State, the issue is not just an issue we saw versus Wisconsin, but an issue we've seen all year. They play an outdated 4-4-2 style. The 4-4-2 formation no longer exists in professional soccer, or rarely does exist, and if it does, it's played in a diamond. There's a reason you see in professional soccer in both the American, European landscape, and it's come into the collegiate landscape as well. Teams don't play 4-4-2, they play 4-3-3, they play 3-5-2. Penn State plays a 4-4-2, which usually tries to help a team control the wide areas. The problem is the Nittany Lions don't control the wide areas. They play very narrow. They try to play through the middle with their two players, Dowda and Freddie Bell. Dowda's a great player. Bell's a great player. They're not going to be good enough to play 2 versus 3, and we saw it versus Wisconsin, where Wisconsin dominated the midfield, and that helped Wisconsin get the ball into players like Dean Boltz up top, who had an incredibly good game running in the Nittany Lions back line. On the flip side, the Nittany Lions, despite how good Abubakar Kamara is, despite how good whoever's going to play next to him is, whether that's Dion or Chase Oliver or players like that, if you can't get the ball to those players, it's not going to matter. And that's what happens is we see the two strikers for Penn State completely left on an island. It happened versus Wisconsin. It's the reason the Nittany Lions had very minimal big chances and shots on goal.
Definitely, just like you said, Penn State needs to update their play to see success. But the men's team season has ultimately been underwhelming. They've been eliminated from the Big Ten tournament. But on a more positive note, I'll start with you, Owen. What do you think the Penn State men's team needs to change to be more successful in the future?
Well, first off, they definitely need to change their formation. They were active in their recruiting last year. They were very active. They went out and got players like Kamara. They went out and got players like Kojo Dadsey. Not necessarily the most effective players this season, at least in Dadsey is concerned. And Kamara's been here a couple of years. The thing with Penn State is if they're going to be active in their transfers, they need to get them right. They need to bring in players that can make an impact. The other thing for the Nittany Lions, change the formation. Figure out how to use players like Malik Dowda. We talked about the quality that he has. He's the number 16 freshman in the top drawer freshman soccer rankings this year at midseason. He's a very, very good player. I think he's actually better than the 16th freshman. I think it's just a frustration thing that freshmen are usually, a player like him, it's center defensive mid. He's not going to get as many accolades and get as many, goals and assists, which leads to him being lower on the list than a player like Dean Boltz, who's number 1. So I think for Penn State, use him more, switch formation, active in the transfer window.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Owen. The formation, what I'd love to see is either they somehow find a way to make the 4-4-2 formation successful, don't isolate the forward so much and actually use the width of the field, or the other option is to change it up. And I'd love to see them try something that actually focuses on generating an attack through the middle of the field. I think that'd be very effective if they focus up as a team on really strengthening the center midfield, which really should be the core of their formation.
I completely agree with you. That's something to look forward to in the next season. But moving on from the men's team to the women's team, they've had a more successful season, although they recently lost to Ohio State. Anna, what were your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, so in terms of women's versus men's, they have had a more successful season, but they are also on a not-so-hot streak right now. We knew the California trip was going to be tough, and it was. They came away with a tie and a loss, and then the Ohio State loss was just hard. Obviously, in terms of goal differential, a 4-1 loss is not something Penn State wants to see. Their only goal, of course, from Miss Caitlin McBean, her 14th on the season. But this is actually what I talked about when we sat down last time. We were talking about Penn State women's soccer. And I was saying that they need to lose the slow start because they can't rely on some kind of second half comeback. That's not always going to happen. That's not reliable. And against Ohio State, we watched them go down by 3 goals before they were able to score, and they couldn't recover. And that is something that definitely is not going to fly in Big Ten tournament play.
Yeah, I think McBean's a very, very good player. She's been able to do it on her own. We've seen it. She scored hat tricks, scored great goals. The thing is, if Penn State's solely reliant on her in big tournament matches, it's just not going to be a recipe for success. The thing with the Nittany Lions, they're very good defensively. They're very good in the first half. They have lost second halves this season. It's kind of been a live or die by the second half. And Penn State, they've died by it more than they've lived by it, if we're being honest. The Nittany Lions go into the tournament off on a really rough streak. I mean, they've lost some tough matches, lost versus Ohio State, lost versus UCLA, teams like that. You never want to go into a tournament when you're in a bad run of form because it just doesn't breed well into the tournament. They're going to have some time. They're going to have some time to play. They're going to have some time to, practice and train and get their heads right. But I worry with the Nittany Lions, even if they do beat Minnesota, who they play, then it's versus UCLA. And UCLA is a team that for Penn State, I don't think Penn State has a recipe for success against them, and that's my worry.
That's something the Penn State team needs to work on going forward into their next games, such as Minnesota. They'll play them in the next Big Ten tournament. They've played them before and they won. But what do you think are some of the thoughts about this game coming up, and how do you think the Nittany Lions will play?
I mean, for starters, if we go back to that game, it was a weird game. It was a very weird game at Jeffrey Field. It was a physical battle. The Nittany Lions scored early, then went down 2 goals. Harper scored. Romine scored maybe the best goal I've seen at Jeffrey Field all year. Very, very good player. Very, very good goal. Penn State clawed their way back in. D'Amico scores to seal the game very late on. With Penn State, my worry is just going to be, one, they're away from home, and Minnesota, frankly, is at home. Tournament is being held in Minnesota. It'll be a home crowd. The Nittany Lions haven't been great away from home. They haven't been great against good competition. Minnesota being able to host the tournament, I think, is really going to give them an edge.
Yeah. So facing Minnesota away, like you just said, going to be tough. It's going to be a really physical game like we saw last time. There's going to be a lot of fouls, and the crowd is obviously going to sway towards Minnesota every time. So Penn State is going to need to get really comfortable with fighting back and with being the bad guy. But I think that we saw them prove themselves. We saw them prove themselves against Minnesota already just earlier this month, beating them at Jeffrey Field. I think if they can go into an away match with the same confidence they played with at home, then they'll be okay.